Hello, dear listener, and welcome to Whispers of the Night. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of peace and relaxation. Tonight, we'll wander together through a quiet orchard, following a map that holds secrets of calm, healing, and gentle wonder. Settle into your cozy space, take a deep breath, and let your mind drift as we step quietly into the story. Close your eyes if you wish, and let the soft whispers of the orchard guide you into serenity. You're in a safe, comforting place now, and your journey of rest begins here. Imagine a soft, golden light spilling through the leaves of an orchard, warm and comforting. You feel the cool grass beneath your feet, and a gentle breeze brushes your cheeks, carrying the sweet scent of ripening fruit and herbs. Each breath you take fills your lungs with calm, and every exhale releases tension, letting your body sink deeper into relaxation. In the distance, you hear the quiet trickle of a spring. The water flows steadily, like a lullaby sung by nature itself, inviting your thoughts too slow to drift, to float away. The trees sway gently above you, their leaves rustling softly, and you feel their presence, watchful, protective, and serene. As you walk along a winding path, you notice faint symbols on the bark of the trees, guiding your steps without any need to rush. Spirals, stars, and crescents seem to shimmer in the dappled light, encouraging you to follow, to trust the journey, and to surrender fully to this quiet, magical space. With every step, your body grows lighter, your mind quieter, and your heart calmer. Now, find a comfortable place to lie down. Let your arms rest gently by your side, your legs relaxed, and your eyelids soft. Feel the serenity of the orchard wrap around you like a gentle blanket. Here, in this peaceful haven, the world outside fades, and all that remains is the soft rhythm of your breath and the tender embrace of the orchard's quiet magic. The Orchard Keeper's Silent Map. The map found at dusk. Diane had been walking since morning, and by the time she reached the orchard's edge, her legs felt as heavy as stones, and her breath came in slow, uneven waves. She'd been chasing the dwindling light for hours, hoping to reach a village or even a lonely farmhouse where she could rest for the night. Instead, she found herself standing before a sprawling orchard that stretched toward the horizon, its rows fading into the deepening dusk like quiet corridors in an old dream. The sky above was streaked with lavender and muted gold, the last colors of the day clinging tenderly to the retreating sun. A cool breeze carried the scent of apples sweet, ripe, and soothing. Diane closed her eyes for a moment, letting that scent settle into her tired body. It reminded her of childhood trips where the promise of fruit and peace had always followed her. She didn't know why those memories returned now, but they wrapped around her like a warm, fragile blanket. A small wooden post stood just a few steps inside the orchard's entrance, as if marking the beginning of something. At first, Diane assumed it was simply a boundary marker or a remnant of an old fence. But as she approached, rubbing her chilled hands together, she noticed a thin slit carved into the side of the post. Something was tucked inside, something old. Curiosity stirred, giving her a faint jolt of energy she hadn't felt for hours. She reached into the slit and carefully pulled out a folded piece of paper. The edges were soft and worn, almost velvety with age, and faint dust scattered into the air like tiny fireflies as she opened it. It was a map, hand-drawn, fragile and mysterious. At first glance, it didn't look like much, just rows of straight lines representing orchard lanes. But the more Diane studied it, the stranger and more intriguing it became. Little symbols were scattered throughout the rows, placed beside specific trees. Some symbols looked like tiny stars, others like leaves, and still others resembled shapes she couldn't quite identify. There were no explanations, no notes, no names, no landmarks, only the orchard and these curious marks. She glanced up at the orchard again, the rows now shadowed by nightfall. The trees formed dark silhouettes, their branches swaying gently, as if whispering a welcome she wasn't sure she wanted. The wind brushed past her cheeks, urging her inward, or warning her. Diane shifted her backpack, feeling the dull ache in her shoulders. The straps had rubbed her skin raw after the long journey, and now even the act of moving it slightly made her wince. She needed rest, real rest, the kind that came with quiet air, soft ground, and a mind free from worry. The orchard seemed to offer that, or at least it seemed safer than wandering blindly down the forest road in complete darkness. She folded the map carefully and slipped it into her coat pocket. Then she looked around for a place to settle for the night. The entrance of the orchard held a few fallen branches and patches of grass. But she wanted somewhere sheltered, somewhere where the wind wouldn't nip at her all night. She walked deeper into the orchard, following a narrow gap in the trees where the grass was slightly flattened, as if other weary travelers had passed through before her. The orchard was quiet in the way a place becomes when it has grown used to being alone. Leaves rustled, crickets hummed, and every now and then an apple fell with a gentle thud. Diane's boots crunched softly on the ground, and as she walked, she began to feel a sense of calm weaving through her fatigue. A few minutes later, she found a small clearing between the rows. The grass here was lush, soft, and undisturbed, a perfect place to rest. She set her backpack down with a sigh, sinking onto it like a makeshift cushion. Her back cracked slightly, and she let out a relieved breath. She took out her water bottle and drank slowly. The cold liquid eased her dry throat and soothed her tired mind. Then she leaned back, opening the map again, letting the last strands of twilight illuminate the faded ink. The symbols intrigued her more now that she wasn't rushing to find shelter. She traced one of the star-shaped markings with her fingertip, wondering what it could mean. Was it a guide, a warning, a treasure hunt crafted by someone who lived here long ago, or simply a playful drawing made by a bored orchard keeper? The orchard didn't feel abandoned, though. It felt tended to, maintained in a way that suggested someone still cared for it. The rows were neat, the trees well-spaced, and the fruits, even in the dim light, looked healthy. Someone was maintaining this place. Someone who, for reasons unknown, kept a map hidden inside a wooden post. Diane wondered if she would meet that person in the morning. The thought was equal parts comforting and unnerving. The air grew colder, and she pulled her coat tighter around herself. The orchard's soft nighttime chorus lulled her into a gentle drowsiness. She lay down on her side, her backpack serving as a pillow, and watched the sky dim into deep blue. Stars pricked through, shimmering faintly between the branches. The map lay beside her, rustling softly whenever a breeze passed. She reached out and placed a hand on it, feeling an odd sense of connection, as if it were waiting for her, specifically her, to find it. She didn't know why the thought felt true, but it did. Her breath slowed, her eyelids grew heavy. The long day finally settled fully on her shoulders. But instead of exhaustion crushing her, it simply wrapped around her like a blanket. She let her mind drift, imagining what the orchard might look like at sunrise, the colors, the warmth, the hidden secrets waiting in its endless rows, the rustle of leaves, the smell of the apples, the quiet hum of nighttime lifefall of it, pulled her gently into sleep. Diane didn't dream at first, though she felt herself sinking into that space where thoughts float freely. But after some time, a faint glow began to form in her drifting mind, soft, wavering light like the flicker of a candle. It wasn't something she saw with her eyes, but felt, as though the orchard itself whispered to her beneath the veil of sleep. She didn't wake fully, but her fingers curled slightly over the map, holding it as though it were an anchor in a sea of darkness. The orchard, in its quiet and ancient way, cradled her. Much later, she didn't know how long, an apple dropped somewhere in the distance, its sound echoing more clearly than before. The sound stirred her and made her shift slightly, but she didn't wake. Instead, she drifted deeper into sleep, comforted by the certainty that she was safe within this strange, gentle place. The night stretched on, calm and dreamlike, and though Diane didn't know it yet, her arrival had nudged something awake in the orchard, something that had been waiting for a very long time. When she finally opened her eyes in the morning, with sunlight spilling through the leaves, the first thing she saw was the map lying beside her. It looked different in daylight, brighter, more detailed, almost eager to be read. Diane blinked, stretched, and sat up slowly, brushing leaves and grass from her coat. Her body ached, but in a satisfying way that comes from finally getting rest after days of strain. She picked up the map and noticed something she hadn't before. The symbols seemed slightly raised, as though they had been pressed into the paper, not merely drawn. She brushed her thumb over one of them. It tingled. A small shiver ran up her arm. She stared at the map for several long seconds, unsure whether she had imagined the sensation. But the orchard around her felt expectant, almost lively, as if watching her. Her heart began to beat a little faster, not with fear, but with an awakening sense of purpose. Diane stood. The orchard stretched ahead of her, its pathways dappled with golden morning light. The map felt warm in her hands. Whatever these symbols meant, whatever secrets the orchard held, she was meant to follow them, or so it felt. The wind brushed her hair gently, nudging her toward the first row. Diane took a deep breath, stepped forward, and followed the map into the heart of the orchard, unaware that every step she took was drawing her deeper into a story that had long been waiting for someone exactly like her. Trees with hidden marks, Diane rose just as the first strands of daylight slipped between the branches, casting soft beams across the orchard floor. The morning air was cool and tender, brushing against her skin with the same calming touch. As a mother smoothing a child's hair, she stretched her arms, feeling the stiffness of sleep melt away, and breathed in the orchard's scent, fresh apples, dew-soaked grass, and something faintly floral she couldn't quite place. The map in her hand felt less mysterious now and more inviting, as though it wanted to be understood. Diane brushed her fingers along the fold lines, flattening them gently. The symbols, those tiny stars, spirals, and leaf-like arrows seemed to glow subtly in the sunlight. Their ink deepened, as if the morning light itself breathed life into them. She took a final glance at the place where she had slept, making sure she left nothing behind, then stepped into the first row of the orchard. Leaves shimmered slightly overhead, and a quiet sound like a hush of approval rose from the branches. Diane paused, unsure whether she had imagined it. But the orchard didn't feel silent anymore. It felt alert, aware, as if it recognized her presence. The first marked tree wasn't far. Diane spotted it because the bark had a slight difference in texture, a sort of soft swelling near the trunk's middle. She walked closer, brushing aside a low-hanging branch that carried 3 small apples. And there it was carved lightly into the bark, almost hidden beneath time, a spiral. It wasn't a perfect geometric spiral, but one that felt hand-drawn, almost playful, like someone had carved it with care but without need for perfection. Diane traced it with the tip of her finger. The moment her skin touched the mark, a soft breeze curled around her. Not a gustinot, random air moving through the orchard, but a gentle, deliberate swirl, as if the orchard itself exhaled in response to her touch. The breeze circled her once, brushing her hair across her cheek, then drifted forward down the row. Diane blinked. Her heart beat louder now, not in fear, but in astonished understanding. It was guiding her. She stepped toward the path the breeze had taken. The air ahead seemed slightly brighter, or perhaps she was imagining that too. But each footstep felt guided, like walking after a whisper she couldn't quite hear. The next tree stood taller than the others, with deep green leaves, fanning out like a canopy. Diane approached it slowly, scanning its bark until she found the mark. A tiny star carved faintly, its edges softened with age. She leaned in, placing her fingers over it. Again, the breeze came. This time, it came from behind her, sweeping past her shoulders and drifting toward another row. Diane followed, a strange excitement building in her chest. The orchard's cool shadows mingled with warm splashes of sunlight, creating shifting patterns beneath her feet. She kept her pace steady, not wanting to rush whatever this was. Each marked tree felt like a story waiting to unfold. She began to see patterns in the symbols, the spirals always toward the nearer rows, the stars toward the deeper ones. The arrow leaf marks pointed firmly in a direction, almost like a map within a map. Who carved these, she wondered, and why they didn't feel random. They felt intentional, like footsteps someone left behind for another person to follow years later, decades later, maybe even longer. She reached the next marked tree. This one had an arrow-shaped leaf etched into its bark, the stem pointing downward. Diane crouched, running her hand lightly over the mark. The breeze returned, brushing past her knees and sliding forward. She rose and followed. The orchard's sounds deepened as she moved, Russell's faint tapping, the occasional thump of a fallen apple. Birds chirped softly from their perches, their voices blending seamlessly with the wind. In this quiet living world, Diane no longer felt like a visitor. She felt like someone being welcomed. She reached another tree, another star, another guiding breeze. This pattern continued, like a trail that didn't end. It took her deeper, into the orchard, far past where she had slept, into rows untouched by her before. The trees grew closer together here, their branches intertwined overhead like reaching hands clasping in trust. Sunlight filtered through in gentle beams that seemed almost deliberate patches of gold, forming a pathway. Each time she found a new mark, Diane felt a small spark of anticipation. She found herself scanning ahead, guessing which tree would hold the next symbol. Sometimes she caught a faint glow on the bark before she even reached an old carving, catching the morning light. Some trees bore spirals, curling inward like secrets waiting to be known. Others bore tiny stars, their points uneven and childlike. Still others carried arrow-like leaves pointing in various directions. Diane began to wonder if the orchard once belonged to a family, perhaps children carving stars, parents carving leaves, someone older carving spirals, a family who lived close to nature, maybe, who believed the orchard held magic or guidance. The breeze shifted in tone as she went deeper. It no longer felt like simple air. It felt purposeful. Sometimes it brushed her hand, as if urging her not to worry. Other times it circled her gently when she hesitated between rows. At one point, she stopped beside a tree with two different marks, a spiral and a star carved just inches apart. The bark around them seemed slightly thicker, as if the tree had grown protectively around the carvings over many years. Diane placed both hands on the trunk. The breeze came immediately, swift, warm, and full of movement. It spiraled around her legs, wrapped up around her torso, and lifted her scarf slightly before sweeping forward into the orchard ahead. It felt joyful, alive. Diane smiled softly, unable to help herself. Something about the orchard's reactions made her feel less alone than she had in a long time. She walked for what felt like hours, though she couldn't be sure of the time. The sky brightened fully, turning the orchard into a painting of swaying greens, soft browns, and shimmering golds. Every rustling branch seemed to greet her. Every leaf brushing her shoulder felt like a gentle acknowledgement. And then, after following dozens of symbols, she reached a tree unlike the others. It stood at the intersection of 3 rows, its trunk thick and sturdy, its branches arching outward like protective arms. Its bark bore no single mark because it bore many. At least 5 symbols were carved into its side: spirals, stars, leaves, and a symbol she hadn't seen before, faint crescent curve, nearly invisible unless the sunlight hit it just right. Diane stepped closer, her breath held without realizing it. She placed her palm flat against the trunk. The breeze didn't circle her this time. Instead, the entire orchard seemed to inhale. Leaves rustled across rows. Branches swayed in a synchronized ripple. The air shimmered with a quiet hum, so soft she felt it more than heard it. It ran through her fingers and into her palm, then up her arm in a delicate, tingling wave. The orchard was speaking, not in words, but in sensation and warmth, in motion, in breath. Diane closed her eyes, letting the feeling wash over her. She didn't know what the orchard wanted her to discover, but she felt its intention clearly. Continue, follow the marks, understand them, trust them. She opened her eyes again and looked around. The breeze moved forward, down the path just beyond the many-marked tree. The map in her pocket grew warm, and for the first time, Diane sensed not just that the orchard was awake, but that it was watching her with a gentle, guiding patience, like a guardian waiting for someone worthy to arrive. She took a step forward, then another. The orchard exhaled softly as she walked, leaves whispering overhead. Diane followed the marks deeper still, certain now that this orchard held far more than old symbols and hidden carvings. It held intention. It held memory. It held something waiting just for her. The Whispering Wind Trail. Diane had thought, when she first set foot in the orchard, that the marked trees would form a small loop, something simple, close to the edges, perhaps a forgotten route created long ago. But as she followed the symbols deeper into the orchard's vast interior, she realized just how mistaken she had been. The rows stretched endlessly, folding into one another like the pages of an unwritten story. And the map she carried strange, delicate, and warm to guide her far beyond anything she expected. The morning sun climbed higher, its gentle rays feeding color into the world. Even so, the orchard grew quieter the deeper she went. Not silent, never silent, but quieter in a way that made her footsteps sound almost sacred. Her boots pressed softly into the soil, the earthy scent rising with each step. Dew still clung to leaves and blades of grass, sparkling in the light like scattered pieces of glass. Diane walked with the map open in her hands. She didn't need its details anymore to see the path the trees themselves guided her. She kept looking at it, fascinated by how the ink's faint glow seemed to brighten the farther she traveled. Certain symbols pulsed slightly when she neared the corresponding carved marks on the trees. It was subtle but unmistakable, as though the map was breathing in rhythm with the orchard. A breeze drifted behind her, brushing her shoulders. She stopped for a moment, just to feel it more clearly. It circled her once, soft as silk, and then drifted forward, tugging gently at her coat. "All right," she whispered, barely audible. "I'm coming," she followed. Every step she took seemed to stir the air. When she hesitated at a fork between two rows, the wind fluttered through the branches on one side, sending down a small shower of leaves. Diane blinked, surprised, and stepped in that direction. The breeze hushed, as though satisfied. Path, a real, intentional path, made not by human signs, but by the orchard's own breath. Diane's heartbeat picked up as she continued. She had felt the orchard guiding her before, but now it felt purposeful, almost urgent. Not dangerous never, dangerous but aware, attentive, urging her deeper. And then she noticed the first sign that she wasn't alone. Under a wide apple tree, the shade thick and cool, sat a small woven basket. Diane slowed. It wasn't old. It wasn't abandoned or weather-worn. It looked as though someone had set it down not long ago. Apples inside. It gleamed with morning dew, and a folded cloth peeked out from beneath the fruit clean, patterned with soft blue threads. Diane crouched beside it. She didn't touch it at first. She simply examined it. The weave was tight, skilled, not rushed. Someone had taken care to make this basket. It felt domestic.com, like the kind of basket used by someone who spent a great deal of time tending the orchard. She straightened and looked around. The orchard remained still, but the air felt different, no longer simply guiding, but watching. She continued, walking, her senses sharpened. A few rows later, she found a small stool. It sat beside a tree with low branches, heavy with fruit. The stool was worn smooth from years of use, but sturdy, the kind used for long hours of sitting beneath the trees. There were faint marks on the ground beside it, small depressions where feet had rested or pressed into the soil. Someone had been here recently. Diane touched the stool. It was warm, not from sunlight. It sat in full shade, but from recent human presence. She shivered slightly, though she didn't know why. She wasn't frightened. In fact, she felt oddly comforted. Whoever tended this orchard, whoever carved these marks long ago, whoever used this stool, they cared for this place deeply. That care had soaked into the wood, into the soil, into the leaves. The wind brushed past her again soft, insistent. She lifted her gaze. Something else caught her eye this time. Footprints. They were faint, but the soil was soft enough to hold impressions. They looked like the marks left by Bootsnot, unlike her own, though smaller, lighter. The footprints led deeper still, following the same invisible trail. The breeze urged her to walk. The realization struck her slowly, like dawn creeping across a sleeping landscape. Someone else had walked this precise path recently, maybe even this morning. She followed the prints, each step feeling strangely significant. Her heart beat slightly faster, not from fear, but from anticipation. The orchard no longer felt simply alive, it felt shared, inhabited by another soul who belonged to it in ways she didn't yet understand. The path twisted slightly as she walked. The breeze shifted directions too, sometimes moving with her, sometimes swirling ahead. Diane began to sense a pattern in it. When she paused too long by an unfamiliar symbol, the wind fluttered against the leaves above her, urging her onward. When she admired a pool of sunlight scattered across the grass, the breeze brushed her hair lightly as if reminding her not to wander too far off the trail. And when she faltered at a fork where the footprints faded into softer soil, the branches on the left rustled clearly, unmistakably guiding her. The orchard, Diane murmured, realizing it aloud, is leading me. The idea should have felt impossible. Instead, it felt natural, as though she had always known orchards could do something like this, if one simply listened. She continued deeper. More signs appeared, subtle but undeniable. A piece of cloth, a small clay cup, half hidden behind a root, washed clean by the morning dew. A tiny wooden carving an apple, no larger than her thumb, placed neatly on the ground beside a marked tree. She picked it up instinctively. It was smooth, familiar, almost warm. Someone had dropped it recently, or left it intentionally. The orchard grew denser, the air thicker, quieter, the wind gentler, but more resolute. A strange emotion welled in Diane's chest, something like longing, something like curiosity, sharpened by the sense that she was on the verge of discovering something important. The footprints grew more pronounced here, as if the person who made them had slowed down, perhaps lingered. She whispered into the stillness, though she didn't know why. "Who are you?" The orchard answered, not with words, but with a soft, warm breeze that curled around her wrist, tugging her gently forward. The path dipped slightly, leading into a cluster of older trees whose trunks were thick and time-worn. Their leaves rustled quietly overhead, heavier and darker than those in the younger rows. At the base of one such tree, she found a fresh indentation in the soil, a place where someone had knelt recently, pressing both knees into the ground. Diane placed her hand over one of the impressions. The soil was cool, but the shape was clear. A person had stopped here, paused, maybe rested, maybe prayed, maybe carved another symbol. She rose slowly. The breeze brushed her cheek, warm like a reassuring hand. The map glowed softly in her palm, and ahead, somewhere deeper, somewhere hidden, the orchard waited for her next step. Diane inhaled deeply, then followed the whispering wind trail without hesitation, knowing now that she was not merely following symbols on bark or footprints in soil. She was walking a path someone wanted her to walk, someone who lived here, someone who had left behind clues, someone who might be waiting. The Keeper's Forgotten Story. Diane felt the orchard changing long before she reached the ancient tree. The air thickened with a quiet reverence, as though each step drew her deeper into a memory the land had held for generations. The breeze, once playful and guiding, now moved slowly around her, brushing her shoulders in soft, thoughtful strokes. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel empty, but full of stories, footsteps, and breath that lingered across time. She followed the last row the map indicated, though she no longer needed it. The orchard itself guided her so clearly that she could have closed her eyes and still felt the way forward. Light filtered differently here, calmer and almost golden, like sunlight that had been waiting for her arrival. Then she saw it, the central tree. It rose like a pillar carved by time itself, massive, deeply rooted, and unlike anything she had seen in the orchard so far. Its trunk was wide enough that 10 people could not wrap their arms around it. The bark was dark and textured, thick with age, yet warm under the sunlight. Its branches arched out in every direction, strong and heavy, carrying entire clouds of leaves that whispered in slow, ancient rhythms. Diane approached with instinctive awe. Even before she touched it, she could feel the tree's presence, quiet but powerful, like a guardian that had watched over the orchard for centuries. As she drew closer, the first thing she noticed were were the symbols, hundreds of them. Stars, spirals, arrows, crescents, leaf shapes, tiny waves, curves she didn't recognize, marks carved across the bark from its base all the way up, as high as her eyes could follow. They weren't chaotic. They formed layers, patterns, a history, etched carefully into the living wood. Some symbols were faded, nearly swallowed by new bark, while others were sharp and recent. These weren't random carvings. They were a record, a language, a lifetime of messages. Diane rested her palm gently against the tree. The bark was warmer than she expected, warm like someone had touched it moments before. Her breath caught softly. A hum rose under her fingertips, faint but steady, like the heartbeat of the orchard. "This is where it begins," she murmured, or perhaps where it all had ended. Below one of the thick, low branches sat something small and rectangular, set neatly against the roots. Diane knelt down, brushing away a layer of leaves. A journal. Its leather cover was cracked with age, edges softened, and pages swollen slightly from being outdoors. But it had been protected well, tucked beneath the natural arch of the roots, as though the tree itself had shielded it. Diane lifted it carefully, brushing dirt from the surface. The moment she held it, the breeze stopped completely. The orchard grew still, waiting. She sat with her back against the ancient trunk, legs folded beneath her, and opened the journal. The first page bore handwritings lanted, steady, and beautiful in its simplicity. "If you are reading this, then the orchard has accepted you." Diane's breath hitched. She turned the page. "My name is not important anymore. I was once called the Keeper. These trees were my home, my family, my duty, and my joy." She read slowly, absorbing every stroke of ink. The entries weren't dated. They didn't need to be. They read like memories written down only to preserve the orchard's truth, not a timeline. "I came to this orchard long before my hair turned white. I tended it alone for many years. People passed through, sometimes travelers, wanderers, lost souls, but the orchard did not always open itself to them. Only the ones it sensed needed its rest were shown the markings." Diane pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her heartbeat echoing harder than before. The orchard chose her. She continued reading. "These symbols on the trees are a guide. They show the path to the central root, the heart of the orchard. I carved them over many seasons, listening to the wind, watching where the leaves settled, following where the earth felt warmest beneath my steps." Diane looked up at the carved trunket, the spirals, the crescents, the stars that must have taken a lifetime to carve. The journal's next lines softened in tone. "I did not make the orchard magical. It was already alive when I found it, but I learned to understand its voice. The wind speaks its language. Follow it, and you walk with the orchard's blessing." Her fingers trembled slightly as she turned to the next page. Over time, travelers began leaving pieces of themselves, here carved symbols of their own. Stories, tears, laughter, sorrow. The orchard absorbed them all. It listens, it remembers. Diane recalled the basket, the stool, the footprints. She thought of the tiny wooden apple she'd found. Not just one keeper, perhaps, but many souls who had passed through. The journal grew more personal. "I tended the orchard until my body grew frail, but I never feared leaving it behind. I made this map so the orchard would always be able to guide those who needed rest, those who needed healing, those who needed a place to breathe again. Diane felt the words sink deep into her rest. Healing. She hadn't come here seeking either, not knowingly. Yet something within her eased with each sentence she read, as though the orchard had known before she did that she needed this quiet refuge. She turned another page. When my time grew short, I carved the last symbol, a crescent. You will know it when you see it. Only those who are meant to come this far will understand it. Diane remembered the crescent etched near the tree with many markings. She hadn't known what it meant then, but she did now. It marked a threshold. The journal's writing grew shaky near the final entries. If you have found this central tree, then you have been chosen. Sit beneath it, breathe, let the orchard speak to you. It will show you the rest. The map in your hand is more than ink, and parchment tit is a promise. I traced it with the orchard's wind at my back. You are safe here. Her throat tightened. The last line was short, simple, but impossibly tender. May you find the peace I did. Diane closed the journal slowly, holding it in both hands. Her eyes stung, not with sadness, but with quiet reverence. She leaned her head gently against the ancient trunk. The orchard breathed. A soft, warm wind drifted around her, circling her like an embrace. It rustled the leaves above her, whispering through branches, like a voice speaking without words. A sense of profound calm washed over her, deeper than anything she had felt in years. It was as though the orchard recognized her sorrow, her exhaustion, her need, even the parts of her she had never spoken aloud. She looked out across the orchard, at the paths she had walked, at the rows stretching endlessly like open arms. The orchard had been waiting, not for just anyone, for someone who needed it, for someone the keeper's map could guide home. Diane pressed the journal against her chest, letting the ancient sense of bark and paper fill her senses. She felt the presence of the keeper here, not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as a gentle echo woven into the roots, as if the orchard carried him still. When she finally stood, the wind nudged her softly, not urging her forward this time, but holding her in a moment of stillness, almost as if giving her time to breathe in the keeper's story, to accept the rest the orchard offered, to understand that she had not stumbled here by accident. The orchard had called her, and she had answered. The sanctuary in the heart of the orchard. Diane rose from beneath the ancient tree. The journal pressed lightly against her chest. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the orchard's branches, painting the ground in patches of gold and green. The wind whispered around her, carrying a sense of encouragement that made her steps feel lighter. Even after the long hours she had spent wandering the orchard's winding rows, she adjusted her backpack and unfurled the map again. The symbols glowed faintly in the morning light, pulsing as though the orchard itself reminded her that the journey was far from over. With careful steps, Diane followed the final markings on the map. Spirals led her to the left, crescents nudged her right, and stars pointed directly forward. Each movement felt deliberate, purposeful, almost ceremonial. The air grew warmer as she ventured deeper, carrying a subtle sweetness, a mingling of ripening fruit, herbs, and damp earth. Diane inhaled deeply, letting the scents fill her lungs, grounding her as she moved forward. Anticipation curled in, her chest calm but insistent, like a quiet promise that she was nearing something extraordinary. She walked for what felt like hours, though she had no sense of time. The orchard seemed to shift around her. Sunlight dappled the leaves differently, here, as if each tree leaned slightly toward her, guiding her path. The gentle rustling of branches and leaves was accompanied by the distant, soothing sound of running water, a soft trickle that threaded through the orchard like a secret melody. Diane paused to listen, her heart pounding with quiet excitement. Somewhere ahead, hidden within the orchard, the final destination awaited. Then, through a subtle break in the dense rose, Diane noticed it, a structure half hidden by vines and climbing plants. At first, it appeared only as a shadow, a dark shape amidst the leaves. But as she drew closer, the details emerged. A small, ivy-covered cottage, quaint yet sturdy, with smoke curling lazily from a tiny chimney. Warm lamplight flickered from the windows, spilling golden hues across the stone path leading to the door. Diane stopped, holding her breath. The sanctuary seemed to hum with life, though no one was in sight. The air around it was thick with the faint aroma of herbs and baked bread, and the sound of the nearby spring trickled more clearly, a delicate music that harmonized with the wind through the orchard. The cottage felt alive, as though it had been waiting patiently for her arrival. For decades, the sense of welcome it radiated was almost tangible, and Diane felt her chest loosen, her shoulders finally unseal and show. Slowly, she stepped onto the stone path, her boots crunching lightly on the mossy stones. Each step carried her closer, yet she felt no urgency. The orchard had guided her gently, and she trusted the rhythm it had set. As she approached the door, she noticed the ivy-covered walls were dotted with small flowers, pale blue and white, that swayed slightly with the morning breeze. Their delicate scent mixed with the herbal fragrance floating from the cottage, creating a calming, almost intoxicating aroma. The door was wooden and aged, its grain warm under her fingertips as she reached out. It opened with a soft creak, revealing a cozy interior bathed in lamplight. The room was small but inviting, sunlight spilling through the windows and reflecting off neatly arranged shelves filled with jars of dried herbs, bundles of flowers, and stacks of cloth. The floor was swept clean, and a soft rug lay in the center, promising comfort to anyone who might rest there. Diane stepped inside slowly, taking in every detail. A wooden table near the hearth held fresh fruit, a loaf of bread, and a small earthenware pitcher of water. Atop the food was a folded note, its edges worn slightly from handling. She picked it up carefully, unfolding it to reveal neat handwriting. "Welcome, weary traveler. You are safe here. Rest, eat, and breathe. The orchard has guided you to this place because it knows your journey has been long. May you find peace and healing within these walls." A soft smile curved Diane's lips, the warmth radiating from the lamplight. The carefully arranged food and the note's gentle words conveyed a care that transcended the ordinary. Someone or something had prepared this place with intention. The sanctuary was not abandoned. It was maintained, tended to, and waiting for those who needed it most. She set the journal down beside her on the rug and began exploring the shelves. of herbs were labeled in a careful, almost artistic hand: lavender, chamomile, rosemary, sage, thyme, mint. Small bundles hung in the corners, tied neatly with threads of blue and brown, their scents drifting faintly into the air. The hearth had embers ready for lighting, suggesting that someone had anticipated the need for warmth, even when no one was present. Every item was placed with care, a quiet mindfulness that spoke of love for this sanctuary and the travelers who would find it. Diane moved to the window and gazed out. The orchard stretched endlessly, trees swaying gently in the morning light, their shadows casting delicate patterns on the ground. The small spring nearby glimmered, its water trickling over smooth stones in a melody that was almost hypnotic. Diane pressed her palm lightly against the window, feeling a connection to the orchard outside the same connection that had guided her through the labyrinth of symbols and markings. She lowered herself onto the rug near the table, brushing her hair back from her face. For the first time since her journey began, Diane allowed herself to breathe fully, letting the tension seep out of her muscles. She closed her eyes and listened. The soft trickle of the spring, the occasional rustle of leaves, the gentle hum of life both inside and outside the cottage. She felt cocooned, held in a space that existed both in the present and in the quiet memory of all who had come before her. Her fingers brushed the journal, and she opened it once more, letting her eyes drift over the keeper's careful words. Each sentence resonated now more deeply, carrying the weight of a life lived in harmony with the orchard. Diane realized that the sanctuary was more than a resting place. It was a continuation of that life, a place where the orchard's voice could be heard, and where travelers could experience the calm and healing the keeper had known. The thought settled in her mind, gentle but powerful. She had been guided here not by chance, but by intention, by the careful weaving of paths, symbols, and whispers in the wind. This place was meant for her, or at least for someone like her, a wanderer, carrying burdens, seeking quiet, seeking restoration. Diane could feel her heart expanding, the tight coil of exhaustion and uncertainty loosening with every breath. Time seemed to stretch here. Minutes became hours, though Diane did not keep track. She explored every corner, the kitchen area with its neatly stacked dishes, the small windowsill lined with tiny clay figurines, each carved with delicate care. Even the air itself seemed intentional, carrying the scents of herbs and earth, sweetened with faint traces of flowers and baked bread. She sank more deeply into the rug, leaning back against a soft cushion and letting the lamplight bathe her. In warmth, her mind wandered over her journey, the map, the spirals, crescents, and stars, the ancient tree and its hundreds of carvings, the whispers of the wind, and now this sanctuary, hidden yet alive. Every step had brought her closer to this moment, a convergence of guidance, history, and care. Outside, the orchard seemed to breathe with her. Leaves rustled softly, the branches swayed in a slow rhythm, and the gentle trickle of the spring provided a constant lullaby. Diane felt connected not only to the keeper, not only to the orchard, but to the countless travelers who must have rested here before her. Each presence left traces, carved symbols, careful arrangements, small gestures of care that accumulated into a quiet symphony of life, memory, and welcome. She opened the note again and read it slowly, savoring the words, "Rest, eat, and breathe. The orchard has guided you. may you find peace and healing within these walls." The simplicity of the message belied its depth. Diane understood that this was a place for reflection as much as for physical rest. It was a space that demanded attention, patience, and gratitude, offering in return a rare clarity of mind and heart. She rose, moving to the hearth and brushing off the soft rug. A small kettle sat ready, and she poured fresh water from the pitcher, feeling the warmth seep into her hands. She prepared a simple meal from the fruits and bread, each bite grounding her further into the sanctuary's embrace. Every sensations, the textures, the aromas, the quiet sounds, was amplified by the calm surrounding her. Each moment a meditation in its own right. As the day stretched on, Diane wandered through the sanctuary, tending gently to the space as if she were contributing to its care. She rearranged a bundle of herbs, brushed a few leaves from the windowsill, and moved the journal to a small shelf near her resting place. The sanctuary, though maintained already, felt more alive with her presence, a collaboration of care between the orchard, the keeper, and now herself. Hours passed, yet Diane did not notice. The sun arced across the sky outside, and the orchard's light shifted with it, touching different parts of the cottage, as though marking the passage of time in gentle, imperceptible ways. The trickle of the spring became a constant lullaby, the wind a soft companion that moved around her, comforting and protective. Finally, she lay down on the rug, the journal beside her, and closed her eyes. Every fiber of her being felt at rest. Her mind no longer raced with thoughts of the road, the distance yet to travel, or the weariness of her body. Instead, she was fully present, immersed in the sanctuary's calm embrace. The orchard had led her here, not by chance, not by accident, but with intention. And in this hidden heart of trees, vines, and gentle lamplight, Diane finally understood what the keeper had meant, that there existed places, rare and sacred, designed to heal, to pause, to nurture the spirit weary from the world. She exhaled, slowly, letting the warmth of the lamplight, the murmuring spring, and the whispers of the orchard wash over her completely. Here, in this sanctuary, Diane felt the journey settle inside her, not as a burden, but as a gentle story of guidance, care, and quiet wonder. And for the first time, in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to simply be. The orchard, the keeper, the symbols, and this cottage had brought her to exactly where she needed to be. Every path, every mark, every whisper of the wind had led to this place of peace. Diane let herself breathe fully, surrendering to the calm and warmth of the sanctuary, knowing she could rest here as long as she needed, before the world beyond the orchard called her onward once again. A restful night and a new dawn. Diane settled more comfortably on the soft rug of the sanctuary, the journal resting beside her, the glow from the lamp casting warm, golden light across the room. The day outside had been long, filled with winding paths, whispered breezes, and hidden messages etched into the orchard's trees. Now, in the quiet of the sanctuary, she felt a rare, profound calm begin to settle into her bones. Every muscle, every thought, Every pulse of her heart seemed to slow in harmony with the gentle rhythm of the orchard surrounding her. She lay back, letting the warmth of the lamplight envelop her. Her gaze drifted upward, noticing the ceiling beams, the shelves filled with neatly stacked herbs, the tiny figurines perched in corners. Each detail seemed alive, imbued with care and intention, as if every object here had been placed with the understanding that it might one day offer solace to a weary traveler. Diane's fingers traced the journal's cover again, feeling the smooth, aged leather beneath her touch, and she allowed herself to imagine the keeper sitting nearby long ago, writing these words with purpose, knowing that someone like her might one day find them. Outside, the orchard moved gently in the twilight. The wind was softer now, brushing through leaves and across the window panes in delicate patterns. Diane closed her eyes and listened, allowing the orchard's quiet symphony to wash over her. The soft trickle of the nearby spring, the occasional flutter of a bird settling into its nest, the slow sigh of branches swaying each sound carried a meditative quality, grounding her in the present moment. Sleep came slowly at first, a hesitant drift into rest as Diane's mind replayed the day's discoveries. The path through the orchard, the carved symbols, the subtle guidance of the wind, and finally, the hidden cottage that seemed almost alive. It all played in her thoughts like a gentle story she could both witness and inhabit. Yet the sanctuary was patient. It offered no rush, no pressure, simply a space for her body and mind to relax fully and gradually. As her breathing deepened and her heartbeat slowed, she felt herself sink into a peaceful, restorative sleep. In her dreams, the orchard continued to guide her. She wandered beneath moonlit branches, walking softly along paths that seemed to glow faintly beneath her feet. Symbols she had not noticed during the day shimmered subtly on tree trunks, and the air seemed to hum with quiet encouragement. Diane felt herself entirely at ease, as though every step she took was cushioned by the orchard's invisible embrace. Figures she could not fully see, perhaps echoes of past travelers, or the keeper himself, moved around her, not intrusively, but with a tender guardianship. The trees whispered in voices she could almost understand, carrying the same silent guidance that had led her through the winding paths the previous day. The night passed slowly, timeless and unhurried. When Diane stirred, she felt the warmth of the sanctuary still pressing gently against her skin. A faint shaft of light had begun to pierce through the window, brushing across the floor like a delicate promise of a new day. She rose carefully, stretching, and looked around the small cottage. The room was unchanged, yet somehow felt even more alive, as though it had absorbed her rest and now radiated that quiet renewal back toward her. Stepping toward the window, Diane opened it to inhale the morning air. The orchard greeted her with a gentle chorus of birdsong, the sun climbing slowly, brushing the leaves and the earth with soft light. She noticed something new, subtle but unmistakable. Markings had appeared along the trunks of the trees lining the sanctuary, fresh symbols, carved with the same care as the older ones, glowed faintly in the morning sun. Spirals, tiny stars, crescent moons, all seemingly deliberate, guiding her toward the next step of her journey. Diane's heart lifted at the sight. The orchard had not only offered her rest, it had prepared her for what lay ahead. The path was renewed, alive with quiet energy, as though the trees themselves were communicating directly with her, sharing wisdom and direction through their silent marks. The journal she had carried, once a reminder of the keeper's story, now seemed to pulse faintly in her hands, as though imbued with the orchard's living spirit. She packed her belongings with care, tucking the journal securely into her bag and adjusting the map so it lay flat against her chest. Every step she had taken through the orchard had led her here, to this moment of quiet awakening and renewal. Diane felt a profound sense of gratitude for the guidance she had received, for the sanctuary that had restored her, and for the orchard itself, which had taught her to listen, to observe, and to trust in the subtle, patient unfolding of life. Before stepping outside, she paused for a final glance around the sanctuary. The lamplight flickered faintly in the early morning, casting long, soft shadows across the floor. The shelves of herbs, the neatly stacked cloth, the small figurines all seemed to acknowledge her presence, as if the cottage itself wished her well. Diane inhaled deeply, letting the rich aroma of herbs, earth, and morning air fill her senses. She felt ready not just to leave, but to carry the lessons and calm of this hidden place into the wider world. Pushing open the door, Diane stepped onto the stone path, the sunlight spilling over her shoulders. The orchard greeted her with a gentle breeze, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers and fresh earth. Her eyes followed the newly appearing symbols, tracing the silent guidance laid out before her. With each step, the path seemed to pulse. Softly beneath her feet, the map in her hands glowing faintly, alive in rhythm with the orchard. It was no longer simply a piece of parchment. It was a living guide, attuned to her presence and the journey ahead. Diane paused at the edge of the sanctuary's clearing, taking one last, long look at the cottage. Its ivy-covered walls, warm lamplight, and carefully tended interior would remain in her memory, a quiet refuge she could recall whenever the world felt heavy or uncertain. Then, with a deep breath, she turned her gaze to the path before her, following the newly inscribed symbols with steady steps. As she walked, Diane felt a sense of clarity and renewal settle into her very being. The orchard had not merely provided rest. It had gifted her insight, patience, and the subtle understanding that journeys were not only about destinations, but about noticing the quiet miracles along the way. Every rustle of leaves, every whispering wind, every symbol carved in the bark now carried a weight of meaning she could feel in her bones. With the sunrise warming her face and the orchard stretching endlessly around her, Diane stepped forward, guided by the living map and the gentle pulse of the trees. She knew that she would leave this sanctuary changed. Watchful care of the orchard itself. The wind brushed past her once more, soft and encouraging, and Diane smiled. The path ahead was open, marked by symbols that seemed almost to hum with quiet energy. With each step, she felt the orchard's presence alongside her, not as an observer, but as a companion, a steady guide through the unfolding story of her journey. And as Diane walked forward, the glowing map pressed gently to her chest. She realized that the orchard had not simply guided her here, it had awakened her to the rhythm of life, the beauty of patient care, and the quiet power of places that exist to nurture, restore, and quietly guide those who are willing to listen. She carried the lessons, the calm, and the renewal of the sanctuary with her, stepping into the new day with a heart unburdened, a mind at peace, and the map alive and pulsing faintly as a companion on the path still to come. As dawn breaks, the orchard whispers its farewell. Gentle and kind, carry its calm with you, like a soft, hidden map of peace. Every step forward can be guided by this quiet magic. Remember the keeper's wisdom, tucked in every leaf and breeze. Return to this sanctuary in your dreams whenever you need. And now, sleep well, dear listener, wrapped in the orchard's embrace.